I think we can start. We do seem to have
Yes.
8 9 participants now.
Yeah.
So we can start with the webinar, and people seem to be coming in slowly. So hope we'll have more participants.
Yes. Yes, I think we should.
Um, so a very good morning to all. My name is Architect Tushar Mittal, and I'm a teaching faculty at the Periyar School of Architecture, New Delhi. I welcome you all to the 39th webinar in the Every Friday webinar series, a platform for young minds to express their ideas. Today's webinar will be exploring pop art and the perception of motion, depth, and form. It will be led by architect Mohammad Fauzan Mirza. So before introducing the speaker for today, I would like to honor architect Pravindra Raj Mehta, who is the mentor of our school. He is also the former president of the Council of Architecture. So I would request, sir, if you could just say a few words of encouragement for us.
Thank you, Tushar. Very warm welcome to Mirza and all the participants. As Tushar said, this is 39th in the series, and we're very proud of the younger generation which has been participating, sharing their idea and views. And we at Periyar, we are committed to pursue this series and the thought process wherein the young minds, they bring about an idea which could cause change now or in future. We are very happy to host this series, and Tushar has been working very hard, and I invite all of you to actively participate in today's presentation, which is a very unique scheme of things in art, and has been utilized by many of the architects in forming their building or shaping their idea into reality. Enjoy this, interact in this seminar, and if you have an idea, do connect to Tushar and share that with all of us. Thank you, and very warm welcome to all of you once again.
Thank you so much, sir. Now I will introduce the speaker for today's session, architect Mohammad Fauzan Mirza. So Fauzan is an architect and artist who completed his B.Arch from the University School of Architecture and Planning, IP. He has worked with Anagram Architects and Tata 1mg on a variety of projects ranging from residential to institutional projects of socio-cultural significance and design research for the healthcare sector. He is also an artist and does large-size oil paintings which narrate ideas using the amalgamation of realism and abstraction. And his works have been exhibited at significant events and places in and around Delhi. He is now pursuing his master's in environmental design from the University of Calgary, Canada, where his research involves housing fabrications and off-grid systems. So I request Fauzan to now begin with the presentation.
Hello, everyone. Great to be here back again. It's the second time I'm presenting with Periyar School of Architecture. Thanks, Tushar, for inviting me. And thanks, Prem sir, for your kind words. So I would like to, basically this presentation was on a short notice. So it's basically an improvised version of the previous one. If you have not attended the previous webinar, this is for you. So it's on op art. So op art basically translates to optical art, and which relates to optical illusion in the art field, and why we're going to look at various aspects of it and why it is important as an architect to understand the importance of art and exploration of forms and integration. So I've tried to cover various topics inside this presentation. So like starting with art in architecture, optical illusion, the effects of optical illusion, its brief history, and various types which are used in architecture, and then how it can be helpful or useful while designing buildings or generally activating public spaces. So let's begin with the importance of art in architecture. So when we start architecture school during our first year, second year, we've been taught this arts and graphics chapter or subject. So and most of the times it happens that we don't realize the importance of it while doing it, and later on we get to know. that it becomes a fundamental foundation, basically, about design thinking, and it's very helpful as you proceed, and it widens your ideas. Now, optical illusion is a form of experimental art that is not normal, basically, and normal to see. And it is defined in simple terms, if you want to define it, as something that deceives the eye by appearing to the other than what it is. So, if we talk about what does optical illusion do, there are series of things. It evokes perceptual illusions. It creates ambiguities, contradictions in the eyes of the viewer. It's a simple thing, but it has some characteristics which makes it more contradictory to what it is. And optical illusions, as I said, like have been used since a long time by artists and architects, and it was only recognized later on when Renaissance period started in the 14th century. So brief timeline. If I take the names of some significant personalities who specialized in op art and who were the maestros of architecture, um, and mathematicians as well. So in the 5th century BC, that's a long time back. If I talk about Epicharmus, he mentioned that the sensory organs deceive us and present an optical illusion. That was his perception of how optical illusion works. Then Protagoras said that the environment fools us and not the senses. So this was a bit contradictory to the previous statement. Then later on in the 420 BC, Plato stated that deciphering the trickery and ultimately the reality behind illusions is possible with the use of mind and senses. So basically, using your senses uh, to create such art, basically. And finally, if we talk about 384 BC, Aristotle agreed with Protagoras' point that we can rely on the senses to obtain the correct picture of reality. However, a lot of times our senses fool us, and that's what leads to this perception of optical illusion. Now, specific to architecture, if we talk about it, has been used in various buildings since long time, and there are very famous examples of how they've been used. So few of the application in architecture is correctional illusion, then illusion of scale, illusion of weightlessness, and then plane dematerialization. So the first three mostly are being used in the architecture designing, have been used a lot. And the plane dematerialization, if you take a look at that, that that is a more common technique which is used in creating op art, because art is mostly uh, a lot commonly done on a 2D surface. So how to make that 2D surface more interactive and pop out. So talking about each one of them in a bit detailed manner. So correctional illusion, what it could be. So just an example, like when a straight building appears to be skewed or distorted from a certain angle of the viewing point, then correctional illusionism is used and have been used in the past a lot to make it look straight from the user's point of view. And the most famous example is, of course, the Taj Mahal in India. So basically, if you take a look at the minarets, they are actually built inclining outwards and not perpendicular to the ground exactly. And the reason behind that is that when you stand at the entrance of the Taj Mahal and from where the whole Taj Mahal picture appears, the minarets appears to be actually straight and perpendicular from that point of view, which otherwise would have been, perceived as tilted inwards. So that's basically reversing the effect by tilting the minarets outside. So as you can see, like I've marked the red axis. So the red axis represents the true axis, which is built, how the minarets are built. And the black one represents the perpendicular to the ground. Another popular example is the Parthenon in Greece. So basically, again, from the user's point of view, it appears to be perfect in scale, following the golden ratio. And while actually, if you see, it's not so straight or not following the golden ratio in actuality. So if you see the diagrams on the left, um, so A represents what it looks like, and the B part represents how it would look if it was built like A, or like it was built straight and perpendicular to the ground. And C represents how it is actually built to look like A, to look like perfect. So because of the slope of the land and the bulge on the floor, these all the elements were made tilted inwards so that they appear to be straight when you are perceiving it from the ground level. And even the small details in this structure contains this illusionism, even the columns, because they're too high, too tall, and the more taller is the building or the column or any element, it might look a bit slender from the center part. So that's why the columns are actually made bulged outside from the center, as you can see in the diagram. Moving on to the illusion of scale. So what it is, making certain elements of a building look smaller or larger in respect to the other elements. So it works according to the vantage points and where you are standing, how you're perceiving the buildings, and it changes from different point of views. And this again, Taj Mahal has a lot of examples of optical illusions and playing with a person's perception of spaces, because you travel a symmetrical access through the gate, and when you're traveling through the entrance gate, you see the Taj Mahal. And as you move closer, the as you move away from the entrance gate, the Taj Mahal looks to be bigger. But in originality, if you move closer to a building, then only you see the building to be getting bigger, right? So this creates an opposite effect basically, and that's through the arched opening, and you see Taj Mahal through a kind of lens. Next is illusion of weightlessness, which are often used where the structures are built, which are very heavy in appearance. So, and mostly it is used to make the interior spaces look lighter. And one very famous example is the Hagia Sophia, Istanbul um, museum. Now it's a mosque, I think. Yeah. So, as you can see, the roof structure, uh, it's a huge domes and vaulted structure, and below you see a lot of colonnade and heavy balustrades. But the thing is that most of the structural elements are placed outside the building and does not appear to be visible from inside the building. So that is one factor, like how you make the interior space look lighter. And the other important thing that they've done is like they've tried to make the roofing or the upper part of the structure to be very light, open, and spacious. And that is done through these openings that are there. And the other important things that all the beams or the walled edges that you may call, or the squinches, are actually outside the building. And if you see the diagram, the beams marked as B and C. So those are the external beams which don't appear to be visible inside. Inside part only has the artwork, the light structural membrane, and a lot of openings to make it more, even more lighter. And this is another example. You can visually also see that the ceiling doesn't seem to be so heavy. Now, the most interesting part, or which leads us to the discussion of op art, that is plain dematerialization. So that is basically using composition of 2D art, patterns, lines, shapes, contrasting elements to create different form of arts. So yeah, op art, also called the optical art, it's a branch of the mid 20th century geometric abstract art, and a lot of artists came up with such art forms, explored various dimensions of it, which we are going to take a look. It started in the 1950s and the 60s, and some of the notable artists were, and the founders of optical art were Victor, Bridget, Richard, Larry, and Jeffrey. We're going to see their works in the following slides as well. And the first public exhibition that took place, which exhibited a lot of artworks related to op art, and the whole space was designed to be, as a perception of ambiguity, and that was called the Responsive Eye exhibition, and it took place in the New York City in 1965. And the intention was to basically create the illusion of movement or part exist as an object than as generators of perceptual responses. That was the quote for the exhibition. And these are some of the notable artists. Mr. Victor Vasarely was the is called the founder or the father of art, and he was quite inspired by uh, the lines and patterns on the zebra, and that's how he created this artwork. And mostly all of his artwork were created around the black and white stripes and using it in different forms. Then Bridget Riley was another significant artist who explored different geometrical forms and used the simple lines to create different variations in geometry. So some of them are rectilinear, some of them are very um, following curves and flows. Then Carlos was one artist who did a lot of public art as well and used the optical illusion art in public spaces such as the staircase. Then Richard Joseph was another famous personality from the US, and he mostly hand painted all his art stuff. So the painting that you see below is also hand painted, and yeah, it produces a sense of depth using contrasting colors. So the basic fundamentals behind op art, as like how do we perceive it or how does it happen, is basically based on either perspective illusion or chromatic tension. So chromatic means colors. So different combinations of colors and the right complementary colors used together are the key to create popping op art. And as you can see, like um, contrasting lines, the black and white combination is the most effective way of turning a 2D surface into motion or turning it into different forms. And it's simple repetitive forms, again, if you see on the right side of the building as well, um, which makes the 2D surface look have a sense of depth and perceptions. And down below, if you see the curves part, that was basically a part of an exhibition at Paris in 2017. Makes the space looks completely non-rectilinear. And this is some example. This is some practical example basically on how um, plane dematerialization or optical patterns can be perceived as a different form from different point of view. So if you see the left one, you can't really see the depth effect. But if you see the top one and the bottom one on the right side, you actually see the surface to be made of 3D elements. So it depends a lot on the point of view or the perspective from where you are viewing the artwork. And yeah, I like to quote this building a lot because it has magnificent features all around in every detail, in every element. And if you can see, like from I have been there, and it literally surprised me when I saw this thing. So if you see the minaret, like you see these surfaces divided by this exact pattern, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we count 8 edges. But in actuality, what the surface is like, it's this. So it's one plane surface, and it appears to be as if it's divided into two parts. So that's one very interesting detail in this building, in Taj Mahal, amongst the others. And like after my visit to the Taj, I was inspired, and this was one of the small intervention project in my bachelor's degree arts and graphics workshop, where we had to paint our classrooms, and decided to do this blank wall as a tessellated beam sort of thing, which represents depth effect, and it's just using like simple stripes and black and white color. And moving on, I mean, we have covered most of the artistic part and what all applications could be there in architecture. But moving on to something more contemporary and how it has been used in the current scenario. And it's not exactly optical illusion in the form of artistic way, but it's a mix of things which I've put up together, and I feel contributes to the illusion, if not optical art. So if you talk about this building, like it's through materiality. Like you see a floating block of rammed earth structure, and the bottom part is actually mirror which reflects the landscape. So whatever the concept might be, you know, getting the landscape inside or integrating it, and not making the building look very bulky on site, maybe. So that is one way, small intervention to take in optical illusion in your project. And this again creates a sense of motion, since it's a water body like a swimming pool. So it's just an artistic way of representing the flow of water through pattern tilings in the form of curves. And this is the exhibition I was talking about earlier. It was the Gallery Mitterrand in Paris in 2017, and the artist was Peter Kogler. So he basically converted this rectilinear cuboid into this sort of flowy space where you cannot actually decipher the edges of a space, and it makes the space look more even and more uniform, or more flowy and non-rigid, basically. And this is one of the very interesting contemporary expressions falling in the graffiti category, I would say, and in the public art category, which is becoming very important nowadays to activate urban spaces. And get to see this a lot in various cities, even in Delhi. You might have experienced a lot of public art coming up, and since I moved here in Calgary, I've been experiencing a lot of spaces have been activated using public art, and it's a very important part of the urban fabric. So be it like a 2D art or be it art installations. So yeah, this is again use of different shapes and abstractions so as to make the corner or the edge of the building um, to be a holistic one, and not an intersection of two roads, basically. This is again one another example. So converting a boring facade of a building into actually an interactive thing, um, creating depths, volumes, and it's just through art. Like you don't have to project out materials and create structures for that. Just need a plain surface and the right point of view, the right color schemes and compositions to achieve this. Another example of a train station footpath uh, where the heavy structural area which contains a lot of trusses and metal members, which might have been looking very, bulky and techy. So these simple intervention of these red curves makes it look a bit more smoother, I would say, or bit less rigid and interactive. And also the colors, pop out as against the existing structure that's there. And yeah, it's been used on a large scale as well in the Louvre Museum, if you see in the courtyard or the open plaza. This was one very famous art that was created. I don't know the year exactly, but yeah, you can see on the left-hand side how this art on the right that has been made creates a sense of um, increase monumentality, I would say, because it creates this sense of um, makes the structure more humongous or having more depth to it, um, and integrates the whole space together. And then you have like small interventions in interior spaces, be it art galleries, be it your homes, or cafes or restaurants. So small interventions using optical illusion or art can be very effective in making the spaces very interactive. So to conclude with, there are certain set of points which I've noted down, which you can perceive or uh, get to know by studying op art, or what effects can it have on you and your thinking. So basically what it is, it's like treating a plane surface by creating depth and volumes. It can be used to treat edges, sharp edges, rigid shapes, rigid interiors, or public spaces to make them more smoother. And then to aid in creating a sense of larger space or a smaller space, as we talked about the scale, sense of scale, illusion of scale. So that's done by that. And then obviously to make architectural composition look aesthetically pleasing, you need to do fine tunings and adjustments, such as the example of the Taj Mahal. And yeah, our part is used mostly a lot in public spaces as well to create a strong visual perception. So that leads to this activation of spaces and makes the space more interactive. And that's it. That's what my take on optical art. And there's a lot to explore basically. And yeah, I think to close the webinar, I would like to say that art is actually very important part of architecture, and I think it should be taken, both the things should be taken hand in hand, and it forms a strong foundation for design thinking and thinking out of the box in architecture. Because if you like straight away go to the technicalities, you would be quite rigid in forms of exploring different stuff. Yep. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Fauzan. I think it was a wonderful presentation. So I think we now open the floor to discussion and questions. So if there's any participant who wants to ask, they can either put it in the chat box or simply unmute themselves and ask a question. But I do have, I think, before taking in questions from the participants, there's one that I do have a burning question for Fauzan. So
Yep.
Fauzan, like a lot of these examples are very perspective based, right? So
Right.
when we're creating any perspective based art form, so there's a certain kind of so let's say in terms of if it's an exhibition, then you know that you have to direct the user in a certain direction. So it makes a bit more sense in that case that you know already where the perspective is or where the
Mm,
viewing point is. But let's
mm,
say in case of a building or of which is on a terrain, or let's say in case of especially an urban area,
Right.
what sort of preparation goes into sort of determining that point of view? Because there won't be one, right? There will be multiple points of view, but you have to sort of figure out which is the maybe the prominent one, and then
Hmm.
because this is not an after construction, right? Like for example,
Exactly.
let's say in the example of Parthenon,
Hmm.
it wasn't an after construction thing that was implemented, but it was implemented during construction, during design. So
Okay.
how do we go about, or what sort of preparation goes about in sort of figuring out that point of view?
Mhm. So actually, like part of the answer lies in your question, I think. So as you mentioned, those buildings, like there are certain point of views from where we could see the building, and in galleries we are generally, guiding the people through a certain route. So there, the situation is fixed. But as we saw, like optical illusion as being used in the Parthenon or the Taj Mahal, if you see. So they've been used very strategically and not, uh, just an addition element.
Mm,
So um, again, the buildings, the most prominent point of views of the building, let's say the Taj Mahal is from the entrance gate. So considering that point, it has been designed in such a way that it appears to be perfect from that area. But there are, certain other points also from where you can view the Taj Mahal, and it might not look, you know, as it is supposed to be. So the point of views become very important, and it depends completely on the context of the building or the art installation that's happening. And like if there are multiple point of views, then there could be like amalgamation of maybe multiple optical illusions for different point of views. That's what I think. And but yeah, mostly it's about which is the most important point when you need to correct something by using illusion, or you just need to make the building pop or the space pop a bit. So it depends on the point of view. Yeah.
okay, thank you. So yeah, we do inviting questions from the participants now. If there's any participant who wants to ask, they can either put it in the chat box or just unmute themselves and ask. Do we have questions? In the meantime, Fauzan, if
Yeah.
you could just like, I am not sure if we will be having questions, but in the meantime, if you could just like
Hmm.
give in your own sort of, because you said that you've like after you went to Calgary, you've also like seen a lot of graffiti-based
Right.
artwork that has been used to sort of rejuvenate spaces, right? So if you could just
Hmm.
elaborate a bit more on that.
Yeah, sure, sure. So, as we've been studying in India as well about, activating public spaces, and there are a lot of dead ends, dead edges as well of buildings. So here, what it happens is like there are a lot of neglected areas, corners, and edges of buildings. So what I've observed here, like instead of apart from this graffitis happening on walls, that too are very interactive, by the way. Um, these There are these art installations, 3D sculptures, and which are actually functional as well. So if I give an example um, of a there are benches made like that. There are lamp posts which are designed in a sculptural manner, and they are mostly um, after analyzing the spots where it's most required, or when certain space is used a lot, but it's also unsafe at the same point. So a lot of urban interventions has been used here to activate the spaces. So one of the example from one of the professors here only, it was a activation of a public street in one of the campus buildings, and they designed this sort of bus shelter, which has this interactive lighting system. So whenever you move from under the bus stop, it actually changes colors. So it's just simple forms of interactive art forms that are present here. And I think it's happening at a lot of places. Um, And I remember seeing like sculptures and stuff coming up in Delhi as well. And graffiti is lot of graffiti is there in Delhi for sure. But these art installations which can actually be used and be interactive is a new thing that I noticed here.
Thank you. Sir, if we don't seem to be having questions, so if you just give your closing comments on the topic and the presentation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tushar, can I say something?
Yes, yes, sir. Please.
Hello.
Yes, sir. You're audible.
Yeah. Mirza, I think it has been a very, very interesting presentation, and application of op art is many times missed by many of the architects when they do um, large buildings or very small buildings which require some kind of a detail,
Mhm.
and it has a great role to play in creating a aesthetically pleasing situation. Your presentation brought about, I think, both the aspects that how when we work with details, it can
Mhm.
make a difference, and how in larger projects like Hagia
Right.
Sophia, because I have had a chance of understanding that physically there.
Oh, great.
I can see the point you made, that how structure in the interiors could be made light. So I think a wonderful presentation. And as luck would have it, two things I want to make. One is that we were taught op art at SPA.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
at that time, it was part of curriculum,
Oh, that's great.
op art. And second, you are at Calgary, and Jaipur and Calgary, they are sister cities.
Oh, I
So
see.
they work together in a collaborative manner. And we know something about Calgary all the time in India, in Rajasthan. So I think that's the
I
connect.
see.
And I'm looking forward to more interactive sessions between you and
Definitely.
some of the students, because I think this is one idea which needs to be inculcated at the very beginning, that
Mhm.
when they draw their first sketches, they must know the value of art and explore it to their imagination completely. So thank you very much. It has been very, very interesting presentation. Yes.
Thanks a lot, sir. Thanks a lot. Yeah, looking forward
Thank you
to
so
that.
much, sir. Thank you so much, sir. I think we can bring the webinar to a close with this, since we do not seem to be having any questions from the participants. So I thank Fauzan for the wonderful presentation, and also for making time for us during his studies to be able to present this. And I also thank all the participants who have come and attended today's session. And I do hope that I also see you in the future webinars as well. With this,
Mhm.
I would like to bring the webinar to a close. Please have a good day. Thank you.
Thank you, Tushar. Thank you, sir.
Thanks. Thanks,
Have a
Mirza.
good day.